Sometimes you want to play your Switch games and Game Boy Advance games on the go at the same time, but it's a lot to carry with you. Fortunately, you can get Game Boy games on the Switch. Now, I've already made a video on the different Nintendo Switch online memberships, so this video is going to be more about the expansion pack and if it's worth it, game-wise and price-wise. So, the expansion pack costs $49.99 a year, and it includes the base online service itself, which includes the NES, Super Nintendo, and original Game Boy games. The expansion pack adds Nintendo 64, Game Boy Advance. In terms of the Virtual Console games, you also get DLC for Splatoon 2, Animal Crossing, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Nintendo announced a whole slew of new courses for Mario Kart 8, so basically no Mario Kart 9 for a bit longer, but there's so much content here that it can be its own Mario Kart game by itself. 4 booster packs for $24.99, already half the price of the entire expansion pack for the year. 6 packs with 8 courses for a total of 48 courses, doubling the number of courses in the game. Now these DLCs are subjective, depending on if you like the games or if you even have the games. In my case, I only have Mario Kart and I don't have Animal Crossing. First off, they brought back a ton of tracks from the older titles, including some of my favorite like Waluigi Pinball, and added new tracks and tracks from the mobile game Mario Kart Tour as well. As a whole, the bundle is worth it if you are a Mario Kart fan or want to get back into Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I think Nintendo released this to buy them some time for the next Mario Kart and or for a new Nintendo system. Moving on to the next DLC, Animal Crossing's Happy Home Paradise. As I mentioned before, I don't have Animal Crossing for the Switch, and the only Animal Crossing I actually played a lot was the DS one. I got the 3DS one, but never really got into it. Now looking through reviews, and the online sentiment seems to be that this DLC is quite worth it, especially if you really like the Animal Crossing on the Switch. This will add a ton of new extra content and keep you entertained for a longer time. You basically have to design vacation homes for people, well, in this case, animals, and it adds a bunch of new items and ways to decorate the houses. The price is the same as the Mario Kart DLC at $24.99, and I'll have links down below on the DLC, but all in all, it adds a lot of value to the base game. The next DLC they include is Splatoon 2 Octo Expansion. This one, I also don't have the game, so my research was done mainly online. And again, just like the other two, it seems that people really like the DLC. Nintendo added over 80 missions and a single player for this DLC, and it cost $19.99. The story they added seems to be pretty cool, and people online say it's anywhere from 8 to 15 hours, depending on how fast you want to play through it. All 3 DLCs bring the total up to $70 and surpass the cost of the Nintendo Membership Online Plus expansion pack. I'll have links to the videos on reviews of those DLCs that I found interesting in the description. Let's move on to the virtual consoles of the Switch. The NES, SNES, and the original Game Boy are all included in the first tier of the NSO service. So like I mentioned earlier, I'll be covering the expansion pack content, starting with the Game Boy Advance. 10 games are currently available for the Game Boy Advance from the initial 6. I also try to research the prices of the games digitally and also physically. Digitally, the total comes out to about $76. The titles were previously available on the Wii U and were mostly $7.99. A few were more and a few were less. As for the physical prices, the total comes out to about $319. Now these are all physically loose, and I got an average price from GamePriceCharts.com. The link will be down below. And in regard to the Game Boy Advance games, Nintendo has been kind of random with their game releases. One day they could release a bunch of different games, and the next you go 6 months without one. The other virtual consoles, the 64 and the Sega Genesis, have more games than the Game Boy Advance, for now. There are a total of 23 Nintendo 64 games as of this current time. And I did the same thing as the Game Boy Advance. I basically looked at when the Nintendo 64 games were available digitally. And most of these games were offered before on the Nintendo Wii for an average price of 1,000 Wii points, which is $9.99. Come on, you don't know your Wii points? And there are some games which were newly released digitally, like Pokemon Stadium, which was never released digitally before, only physically, and around $32 for a loose copy, North American price. Pilot Wings and Mario Party 3, Banjo-Kazooie, Dr. Mario, and Winback are all new when it comes to digital re-releases. Banjo-Kazooie and GoldenEye 007 releasing on Xbox as well. The 23 total up to 152 digitally, 789 for a loose copy of the games. Now I'm using loose copies because that's cheaper than obviously having the box or even unopened or new games, if you wanted to collect them physically, of course. Now the 152 for the digital cost is a little bit inaccurate because of those new digital re-releases, but if we give them an average cost of $9.99 that they cost on the Wii, so that brings it up more around a little bit over $200. Now I know what you're thinking, the numbers mean nothing, what's the point? You can probably find all these games cheaper somewhere, maybe at a flea market, or maybe you already have them on an older system. Or point is that, hey, look at this Wally, he's cool, look, he can hold my games, kinda. The last virtual console you can play on the expansion pack is the Sega Genesis. On launch, there was 15 games in total, and now it has more than doubled. The classic games are here: Sonic the Hedgehog, Shinobi, Golden Axe, and I haven't really played the Sega Genesis a lot, but now I have all these titles to choose from. Castlevania Bloodline is a really great game that I've been playing a lot, and now I can check out games like Phantasy Star. Now, unlike the other two, some of these games were available on the Wii and some on the 3DS before, but a good number of them have never been offered outside of a Sega collection or their online service, and of course in the Sega Genesis Mini. So they were never actually offered digitally, individually sold, just like we were used to before on the older system. So for those, I gave them the average price of the $8 they cost on the Wii Virtual Console back in the day. So that brings the total of the digital price to about $339, and the physical cost to about $2,000. Now let me put a huge asterisk behind that $2,000 because some of these games were actually never even sold in North America physically, and a few of them as Japanese only exclusives. For example, Pulseman, which was only released physically in Japan, and a loose copy runs about $500. Or Mega Man The Wily Wars for about $600. So the games like these really bring up the prices for the physical releases. So, technically speaking, the expansion pack roughly has a value of about $617 between the Game Boy Advance 64 and Sega Genesis digital games, and a cost of $3,002 for the price of physically loose copies of the game. Now obviously, take these prices with a grain of salt, depending on where you buy from, if you want North American or Japanese or PAL, but these prices reflect the number to add to the value, and I'm sure Nintendo sees the service as a numbers game. At the $600 prices of the digital games with the 3 DLCs, and $50 a year sounds like great value. And I'm not even including the NES, Game Boy, or Super Nintendo titles. Now I know you don't own the games and you're basically renting them, just like having a Netflix account, but for games. And we don't see people judging Netflix by the cost of every movie digitally, which actually, oh wait a second, let me calculate that real quick. Okay, Netflix has over 3,000 movies and 1,500 shows, and now each movie with the price of $9.99 and a season. No, I'm not gonna do that. Of course, it's quality over quantity, or else those 1,000 games in one machines would be top sellers of the world. It's a personalized experience, but for me, some of my favorite games are on the service, like Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, Wario Land, or Yoshi's Island. And new games are going to continue to be added, and eventually the libraries will get bigger and bigger, and maybe new systems will get released on the NSO. But aside from just playing these games by yourself, you can also play online. Now you can play with your friends, or play multiplayer locally, but unfortunately, you can't do both. Meaning, you can't have 2 players on one Switch and play online with your friends, and I think that's mainly due to the accounts tied to the NSO account, I'm guessing. Yes, it's not perfect, and I didn't even speak about the whole point of the NSO, the online connectivity and the speed and issues that we know it has. But the service itself lets you play more games, especially ones you wouldn't actually have played before, because you wouldn't have bought them individually, and it gives you an opportunity to check out systems you might not even played before, just like me with the Sega Genesis game. It's far from perfect, but the question still begs, is the expansion pack worth it? Yes, it is, and it beats carrying around a bunch of cartridges, am I right? Where did all my games go? Oh no, Wally made them into garbage cubes, damn it. He left the game right here. Oh, it's just Taiketsu. Yeah, might as well have it. Dang, not even Wally wants Taiketsu. Wait, Wally, not the camera. Wait, Wally, wait!